Welcome to ETF Market Insights, a weekly show focusing on the evolving world of ETF investing. Each Friday, a new panel of thought leaders aims to provide investment education and insights, with the goal of helping you become an informed investor. Make sure to visit youtube.com/ETF Market Insights to watch previous episodes. And remember to hit subscribe so you receive a notification when we post new content and when we go live each Friday. Thank you for joining us today. Let's get started.
Welcome back to ETF Market Insights. I'm your host, Erin Allen, VP of Online Distribution with BMO ETFs. And today we're going to dig into the topic of artificial intelligence. So definitely one of the most transformative technologies that we're seeing right now, maybe since the internet, from self-driving cars to virtual assistants, Chat GPT. It's clear that, we really haven't seen the end of this, maybe even not even the beginning. And this is definitely going to lead to huge opportunities in the investment space as well, which I'm really excited to discuss today with ARK Invest. So ARK's an investment management firm, for those of you who are not aware, dedicated solely to disruptive technologies. So we're going to focus today's discussion around the future of AI. We'll dig into some of the newer advancements, some of the challenges and opportunities ahead as we really push the boundaries of human innovation. So as always, before we get started, just a quick reminder that we're not providing investment advice or recommendations. Our show is all about providing education to Canadian DIY investors. So welcome, Frank. I want to give you a warm welcome. Frank is the Director of Research on ARK's Next Generation Internet ETF, ARKW. So thanks for being here today, Frank.
Hey, Erin. Thank you so much for having me. Excited for the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And Frank joined ARK as an analyst and now sort of guides the team of researchers focused on the next generation of internet, where they focus on a whole bunch of different technologies like AI that are really expected to transform this space. So let's just dig right into it, Frank. I think we've seen AI go from how I use it to make silly videos and images on the internet to seeing entire jobs being replaced. Even to the concept that AI could help fight climate change and end poverty. So I want to ask you, the expert, what excites you the most about this technology?
Yeah, and it's the kind of the wide-ranging nature of AI and all these different areas that we think it will have a big impact or what make it such a fun topic to talk about now, especially with the rise of large language models and Chat GPT being this fastest growing application ever to 100 million users and plus in just a few months. But I think actually one of the things that we've been focused on for a long time at ARK that is still one of, if not the most interesting opportunities in AI is the autonomous driving and autonomous ride hail that's really enabled by neural network advancements that we're seeing. So when we look at this kind of opportunity that's happening, playing out quite quickly, more quickly than some people think when you look at companies like Waymo or Cruise of GM that already have kind of small localized ride-hail networks, and the company we think best positioned being Tesla that has kind of this massive data advantage with their fleet of vehicles recording kind of these millions of miles of training data every day. We think autonomous ride-hail is going to happen in the next few years and could be a really large opportunity. And how we size that is looking at the ride-hail market today, which is about a $38 billion market with a $2 to $4 cost per mile to actually take a taxi or an Uber service. And adding in this autonomous component, we think can lower that cost down to 25 cents per mile by 2030. So we think that grows this market exponentially from a $30 to $40 billion market to at $1 per mile in the Western market, that would be a $1 trillion market, and global at 25 cents per mile, an $11 trillion market. So it's pretty amazing. And the reason that it's so interesting, I think, to continue evolving our thought on this, even though it's been kind of the main pieces behind our Tesla investment for a while, is looking into these kind of second order effects of what autonomous ride hail could do. And one of those is disrupting, that we focused on this year, the short haul flight industry. So if you look at this cost of transportation declining with autonomous, we decided to look at the short haul flights, say 2 to 3 hours, regional flights. And with autonomous, we think about 15% of flights will be both cheaper and faster than autonomous. And another 45% could be within a reasonable amount of time difference, but still cheaper. So I think a lot of people may opt to take an autonomous taxi versus a flight, especially when you think of traveling with children and the complexities of going through the airport process versus calling a car on your app. We think it'll make a lot of sense, and that could take away a significant portion of revenue from the traditional airline industry. So these like second order things that we can continue to dive into make it just a really interesting kind of complex opportunity.
Yeah, that's really exciting to me. There's so many good things that are going to come out of this, I hope. But on the on the flip side of these exciting developments, we continue to see or hear warnings about the dangers of the technology around things like cybersecurity and so-called bad actors in the space. Being flagged by some pretty big players in the space, Elon Musk, Sam Altman from OpenAI. But what keeps you up at night when it comes to AI? What are your biggest risk factors?
Yeah. So fundamentally, we think AI is going to create much more good in the world than bad. But with any new technology, there's kind of new vectors for good and new vectors for attack. And I think we're seeing, various ways that can play out with AI. I think one of them is like phishing scams, which are already pretty prominent, and the ease of trying to trick somebody into giving you their password or sending a wire, which happens just too much already. With large language models that allow you to, speak natively without apparently natively without pronunciation issues. The emails that you get that look wrong, they're going to look a lot less wrong now. So I think we're already seeing an increase in phishing scams. And we're also seeing, with these coding assistants that help software developers be much more productive, the hackers also have those, and they're able to be more productive in creating novel coding exploits. But at the same time, you have cybersecurity researchers that also have these AI tools in hand that can kind of like fight back against that and help to curtail it. So in the end, I think it looks like the internet, where in the early days, there's new types of hacks that can happen. Credit card, people are scared to use their credit card on the internet, but now global commerce happens online. And I think it will be very similar with AI.
Yeah, Prime Day this week. You better believe I was hitting the board.
Yeah.
And I think, there's a lot of talk about regulation, and I think it's sort of beginning to take shape, and I feel it's important. But what are your thoughts on Biden's proposed AI Bill of Rights, and any thoughts that on the impact this might have to the companies that you invest in?
Yeah, so I think when you look at something like that, on face value, the things that are being proposed make common sense, like the right to privacy and rights to non-discrimination. These things I think are all important to keep in mind when we're developing AI systems, but we also already have existing laws for that. So I don't know how particular we should tie things to one specific technology with fear of kind of overly restricting that industry. Like seeing things more in Europe with tying models to GDPR and having to have every usage of a model pre-approved could hamper how quickly the technology could roll out, and also give like those bad actors a leg up because they're already committing crimes and not complying with regulations. So any new laws aren't going to stop them from exploiting this technology to what its biggest potential is. And then lastly, I think in the AI Bill of Rights from Biden's administration in particular, there's this right to a human alternative. And I think that one's going to be really tricky to implement and decide where we care about that and where we don't. I think, at scale and at mass adoption, these AI systems are going to be, compared to the traditional world, moving at the speed of light, and tying you need a human alternative to it is almost like dragging an anchor behind it. And we already have services that are kind of fully quote unquote autonomous, so you don't always have a human failover today. So I think that one probably won't make its way into kind of actual regulations or laws. But it is important that everybody building these systems and the kind of politicians and regulators are thinking about these types of things as we go.
Yeah, well, at the same time, not holding them back for sure.
Yeah, it's a balance.
It seems like AI is like it touches every single industry. I can't think of one that there's not an application. But what industries, if you look sort of near term, like 1 to 3 year, and then out 10 years down the road, what are the industries that you mentioned autonomous vehicles, but what are the other industries that you see it really touching short-term and long-term?
Yeah, so I think, we talked about the autonomous vehicles and that, changes the traditional auto industry. It changes something like airlines, these analogous industries. It also could change things like entertainment. So we think that artificial intelligence ends up looking like this creation of a production line for knowledge workers that's dramatically increasing productivity. And if you look at the early 1900s, where we had this boom of productivity, the average hours worked by a knowledge worker actually decreased, even though the employment rate went up. So more people were employed, they were just working a little bit less, and GDP per capita grew. And I think that's a really interesting analogy to what's happening today in the digital world, where we may become much more productive and actually able to take a step back and work less, which could create positive impacts to the entertainment industry, as we have to spend less time working and more time kind of consuming content, whether it's streaming services or gaming. I think those are all kind of interesting beneficiaries. And then also not thinking about just kind of industries, but job functions themselves being accelerated. We're already seeing kind of these coding assistants increasing the productivity of software developers by 2 times, and it's only been out for a couple of years, this technology. We think that's really exciting, and that's a labor-constrained industry historically. So the role of your everyday engineer, I think, is going to change dramatically. And then we're also seeing the image models like DALL-E 2 and kind of these more complex products coming out now that help with not just text to static image, but text to 3D objects, really changing graphic designers and game developers and builders of virtual worlds broadly. So it's really something that artificial intelligence, I think, is going to impact absolutely everything. And there's some things in the short term we can see where it's happening kind of right of way, but in the long term, you kind of have to take this more macro view of increased productivity across all industries and all job functions.
I like that idea about our entertainment. I never really thought about it that way. As we work less to become more productive, that we might have more time to spend on that side of our lives. In big ideas, there's a big section around the huge cost declines that you're seeing in this space. Can you talk a bit about this and why you think this leads to such a great investment opportunity?
Yeah, so looking at cost declines is something that at ARK we try to do to assess the potential for a new technology and understand how quickly things are evolving and what types of markets can be opened up by that kind of cost coming down. It's something I spoke to when we were talking about the autonomous driving, of this $2 to $4 cost per mile coming down to 25 cents per mile, and that unlocks this marginal demand that helps this industry grow and become something much larger than say your traditional analyst expects. We've done that with AI as well, kind of looking at the training costs of these large language models and how quickly both the hardware is evolving and the software around it, to see how fast it's happening. I think a common thing used to look at this type of space in the past has been Moore's law. And we like to use a kind of a derivative or a similar methodology called Wright's law. So whereas Moore's law, which predicted that the cost of semiconductors is going to cut in half roughly every 2 years, is a function of time, where over time costs come down, Wright's law is a function of cumulative units produced. And the important insight there is, as you're producing more and more of a good, you're learning best practices and ways to cut costs to make that product kind of more efficient to produce. And as you go out in time, it actually gets harder to reach quote unquote cumulative doublings, because you produce so much of it, the learning for each marginal product is actually slower than when you were really new with something and just kind of getting used to producing it for the first time. So we think over time, Wright's law has been and will continue to be more accurate than Moore's law. And that's what we've applied to kind of the AI training space. So we split that into both looking at hardware configurations and optimizations and the software side. And just from the hardware side alone, we've done a study from 2014 to date, which mostly centers around NVIDIA's products for the data center. NVIDIA really saw this AI opportunity much earlier than many hardware manufacturers. So they were really the first to market with chips designed specifically for training artificial intelligence systems and neural networks. And they've been able to reduce costs by 55% per year. So you could think almost that looks like Moore's law, instead of happening every 2 years, is happening every 1 year. And when you layer on the software optimizations that you can achieve on top of that, regardless of hardware, we're seeing the combination of those reaching a 70% per year cost decline, which is pretty incredible. It's almost cost declining by by 2/3 every year. And we can see that not just from looking at this kind of time series, but also the models that are kind of live in production, some of the stats we're seeing being presented. So there's a company called Mosaic ML that has done a study on this, and they looked at the cost to train GPT-3, kind of the predecessor to the Chat GPT model, for the first time was around $4.6 million in 2020. And by 2022, the end of last year, it cost for a performance equivalent model only $450,000. So that's roughly a 10x over cost decline in 2 years. And they're continuing now. I'm sure when we update that number, it's going to be even cheaper to train that type of model today. And so all of this kind of cost decline means these kind of amazing capabilities that are only in the hands of the largest technology companies today will rather quickly become available to almost every company in the next few years.
That's crazy. Yeah. And then productivity is another point that you guys really hammer home. And I often joke that my job's going to be replaced one day by a bot, but I think almost everyone is exploring how they can use AI within their careers or within the industries. But what have you seen so far in terms of the impact on productivity from AI when it comes to things like knowledge workers, as an example?
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to go deeper in kind of that long-term macro view that I mentioned before, which is thinking, what does all this productivity that we're seeing early signs of in software development or graphic design, what does it mean by 2030 and across all job functions? So we think, we've done a study looking at various functions today that are being improved by AI, how quickly we think that's going to happen in the future. And we think the average knowledge worker could be 4 to 4.5 times more productive by 2030. And when you think on a global level, we estimate outside of China, there's about 1 billion knowledge workers, people that are sitting in front of their computers all day to produce, whatever they do for work. And we collectively pay those knowledge workers about $30 trillion. So if you think of the software companies that are building these tools that are making these knowledge workers more productive, whether it's the coding assistants or everything Microsoft is planning to roll out into the Office suite, or a tool to make a salesperson more effective in closing deals, we think that these software companies will be able to charge based on the value that they deliver in terms of productivity use cases. That's how a lot of software has been priced previously. And if you think of a 4 to 5 times productivity increase on a $30 trillion base, you can quickly see how the potential software revenues could exceed $1 trillion plus by 2030, which is pretty amazing, and that's capturing about 10% of the value created. And depending on whether it'd be 1 trillion if it's closer to 1% value capture, a $14 trillion opportunity at a 10% value capture, which it's really exciting for all the opportunities that we're going to see across that space.
Yeah, those are very exciting numbers for sure from an investment perspective too. Can you talk about a couple of the companies in your portfolio that really have the potential to benefit from this growth in AI?
Yeah, so one of our highest conviction names across a lot of our strategies is Tesla, which I've talked a bit about what that opportunity looks like already. And we think with Tesla's data advantages and their vertical integration with not just the chips inside their cars, but building their own accelerators for training their self-driving models in their data centers, that they're right now best positioned to succeed in that. But talking about companies maybe exposed to that software opportunity I just described outside of the physical robotics world, we think companies like UiPath are really well positioned as well here. So UiPath is a company that builds process automation tools for enterprises across a variety of job functions. So they're already kind of ingrained in this selling process of increasing productivity at organizations. And this novel AI like large language models dramatically increases the types and the number of processes that they can automate. So you can think UiPath's footprint at a company may have been limited to certain job functions in the past, but now that you have LLM capabilities, well, you were just doing, say, back-end accounting automations, now UiPath can sell into the marketing department for the first time. And they're already seeing those conversations increase with their customers. So we think they'll see kind of this dramatic uptick in use cases they can deliver and customer interest because of large language models, and that they're uniquely positioned already being in this productivity and automation space inside so many companies. The last category I'd mention outside of kind of the robots with Tesla and the software space with UiPath are the hardware players. So companies like NVIDIA and AMD that are really selling the chips that are going to power all of these AI models. So NVIDIA, I gave a little bit of this background earlier, but coming to market first with these accelerators and building not just this history of delivering the hardware over time, but a really robust software moat around them. These models become really complex to train, particularly because they're so large and they can't fit just on a single GPU or accelerator. So the software logic to translate kind of an end developer's code to a distributed cluster of thousands of GPUs becomes very complicated very quickly, and that's a moat NVIDIA is really exploiting right now, and you see that in their first quarter report, which had this massive upside surprise for their Q2 guidance because their chips are so in demand in the data center right now, kind of in this AI arms race. Their competitor in AMD is also kind of coming after the same opportunity, but starting a little bit farther behind. But we think they'll be able to come to market with a competitive product in the near future.
And I know that you guys did sell NVIDIA before the big run up. And I think you kind of touched on why the market's moving so fast, right? And there's new incumbents that you think are potentially more exciting and going to grow faster. But any other comments on that you wanted to add?
Yeah, it's a good question, and it goes back really to the founding of ARK in 2014, where we saw NVIDIA talking about this AI opportunity, and it was one of the kind of the 5 innovation platforms that we've built our research around. And NVIDIA was a company we owned at the inception of a lot of our funds in the US when it was just a $10 billion company. And we've kind of ridden with that name through various cycles, selling out of it when it gets a little over exuberant, especially from kind of the GPU mining boom from crypto mining that we saw in 2017 and 2018 and more recently in 2020. So we've kind of consistently traded in and out of volatility around that name. And what we've been looking at now is, you know, how much is the opportunity in the hardware space already in that stock versus these kind of undiscovered opportunities in the software space, which we think are largely at a better price right now than an NVIDIA. So we still hold it in several of our strategies, but it's not a top name, whereas we've preferred the software companies.
Okay. And then another big theme in Big Ideas is around the intersection of all of these technologies, big focus on AI. So can you talk us through sort of how it's intersecting with other technologies? You spoke a bit about robotics, but the Internet of Things and other areas?
Yeah, so one of the things we think is really interesting is looking at these kind of what we call convergences between and among technologies, where the innovation in one technology is actually catalyzing and accelerating the development or adoption of a different technology. And so with the autonomous ride hail, you kind of have this combination of energy storage, because we think these autonomous taxi networks will be electric vehicles because of the lower operating costs, plus robotics, the actual kind of technology in the car, plus artificial intelligence being kind of the brain inside the car, and all of these things kind of coming together to build that opportunity. And we see that in other sectors as well, outside of just the robotics space. I think life sciences and genomics is another one that's particularly interesting. And AI is being used quite a bit there for accelerating things like drug discovery. So there's companies like Recursion Therapeutics that are using artificial intelligence to accelerate kind of the entire funnel of drug discovery, which is actually quite novel. So all of the therapeutics companies, to an extent, are using AI in this kind of top of funnel in drug discovery when they're trying all these combinations to see kind of what might work. And Recursion is actually going down the funnel and adding in not just kind of software AI, but also robotics. So processes that may have in your drug discovery pipeline had to fail over to a human and kind of been rate limited because of that. Recursion is automating those processes with robots to actually become kind of the best in class throughput for this drug discovery pipeline. So that's one in our genomic strategy that we're really excited about.
Yeah, that is exciting. Well, let's That was all very interesting. I wish I had a whole hour for you, Frank, but I want to end on a light note. I think, in all my social settings these days, AI has been coming up, and I like to talk about what's the funniest or weirdest or most embarrassing thing you've ever asked Chat GPT, and we always get some fun ones out of that. So what's your best story around that?
Oh man, there's probably too many to count. We use Chat GPT at ARK for a variety of things, kind of in our day-to-day research. Like I've had like in-depth conversations with Chat GPT about like quantum physics, which is not necessarily funny, but like very interesting that you can accelerate research from doing that. You need to be mindful to fact check everything that it says, but the first thing that came to my mind was actually last night I was at my brother's apartment, and he has a little mini bamboo tree that's dying because he's not taking care of it right. So I asked ChatGPT, what's the best way to take care of a lucky bamboo tree? And we kind of helped him triage. Oh, you need to clip the dead leaves. You need to move it in direct light. That was pretty funny.
That's funny. Yeah, I actually asked when I was preparing for this, I asked ChatGPT what was the funniest thing that it had ever been asked. And it said, if cats can speak English. I didn't think that was the funniest, but it just shows you just a wide range of uses. Like you talk about the plants in your house, that type of thing. My husband actually wrote me a Valentine's Day poem with Chat GPT. So there's a new idea for all people out there. Chat GPT is quite poetic, actually. You wouldn't have thought.
Yep.
It is. All right, thanks, Frank. That caps off another great week of ETF Market Insights. I hope you'll come back soon and we can dig into another theme with you soon, Frank. So thanks again.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Thanks for having me.
So BMO listed 3 of ARK's mandates here in Canada last fall. ARKK, the innovation flagship product, ARKG, focused on genomics, and ARKW, which is near and dear to Frank's heart, the next gen internet, all of which have exposure to the theme of AI, of course, as we discussed. So these are a mirror of the mandates available in the US, but they trade here in Canada on a Canadian exchange in Canadian dollars. So if you want to find out more about those, you can visit bmoetfs.com. Next week on ETF Market Insights, I'll be joined by Alfred Lee, portfolio manager and investment strategist, and our partners at BMO Investor Line to discuss technical analysis and ETFs. So we're going to look at key considerations if you're using ETFs for technical analysis and walk through some of the techniques and tools that are available to you. So I hope you'll join us then. Thanks again for joining, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thank you for watching this week's episode of ETF Market Insights. To stream any previous episode of ETF Market Insights series, please visit youtube.com/ETF Market Insights. Remember to hit subscribe and sign up for alerts so you know when we post new content. Also, we invite you to visit our accompanying website for ETF tools, education, and much more at etfmarketinsights.com. Once again, thank you for watching. The session provided is for information purposes only. Any reference to a particular company or product is for illustrative purposes only and should not be considered as investment advice or recommendation to buy or sell. Particular investments and/or trading strategies should be evaluated relative to the individual's investment objectives, and professional advice should be obtained with respect to any circumstance.